And we will. We're going. I honestly don't know. Yeah. I'm not in charge. Just so I took someone get started.
Yes, that's all. Okay, sorry we're getting started a little late. Hopefully we don't get kicked out early. I've met a bunch of you, but for those who have not met me, I am Stephen Hosom. I'm the lead security engineer for Hotel. If you haven't heard of us, we're a local nonprofit. We build stuff, we do research for people. A couple of years ago, actually more than a couple of years ago now, GitHub did a presentation on a chatbot that I built called Hubot. But instead of being annoying and saying, hey, give me a cookie and responding with here's a cookie, Hubot actually is used to instrument GitHub's infrastructure. And GitHub made this sort of odd argument in that they were somehow improving their operations by doing everything through a chat server. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but one valid point that they made was that when you're doing all of your changes in a collaborative environment, it steps up the awareness of the rest of the team monumentally. So if I'm in the chat channel and I'm making a change to advice, and I use a bot command to make that change, the rest of the people in that channel will also see that I've made that change. And while from an ops perspective, I don't know how many people like that, from an intrusion detection and response perspective, it's actually kind of cool. Because if you look at this from a thought process of, well, all of my alerts get funneled into a channel, and then my responders start to act on those alerts within that channel. If you are working on an alert, and I'm working on an alert, and another incident analyst is working on an alert, what ends up happening is sometimes we start working on the same alert, and then we do a lot of the same work, and come to the same conclusion, but use duplicate effort to do all the process. Instead, doing that in a channel, you might actually notice, hey, I'm already working on that alert, you can go look at something else, or you might look at a different search, give people a couple minutes to find a seat. So in doing all of those things in front of each other, we start to become aware of the actions of each other, and you might even become aware that, oh, hey, there's a nifty little trick that I haven't seen before. That piece of information is available in this log that I've never looked at. Next time that I'm working on a similar issue, I can look on that same, I can use that same piece of information to investigate. So I sat down and I said, how can I implement something that's information security centric that does the same thing as Hubot for my organization? And what I came up with was a bot called GLADOS. For those of you who aren't familiar, GLADOS is a character from a video game called Hosom, and she is kind of this awesome, evil artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, GLADOS worked for approximately 2 or 3 days and was incredibly buggy and terrible. I set out by building her entirely out of Python and integrating with a popular chat server directly. It's caused a number of issues for me. Their API at the time wasn't really hammered out very well. Not intuitive to stay connected and receive a stream of messages. And it turned out that a lot of people had already solved the problems that I had been trying to solve. So what I was trying to build was this really, really cool robot to do all of my work. And what I ended up with was Pay. So I sat down and I said, what can I do to get rid of all of the problems that I'm having so far? And pretty much what I came up with is I've got to use one of these terrible frameworks that I've been reading so much about. And there are 3 major players in this space. There's Hubot, written by GitHub, that we already talked about. my major beef with Qbot is that it's written in JavaScript, and more or less nothing in information security is written in JavaScript. Do we do anything in JavaScript? So, we crypto mine, but I really don't want my bot mining crypto. So, alright, let's go look at something else. There's another player called Lido. Lido's pretty cool, and it does everything you might ever need it to do. It's written in Ruby, which is kind of cool. Metasploit's written in Ruby, and there are a few other information security projects in Ruby. Rapid7's products all have amazing Ruby APIs, as you might imagine. But generally speaking, when you get into other common security products, they don't really have outstanding Ruby APIs. If you look at Splunk, it's just not there. If you look at any of the endpoint tools, they really don't have any Ruby APIs. And you can write all those libraries yourself, but you're going to end up duplicating a massive amount of effort that's already done. So where I landed was on a framework called Airbot. Airbot is written in Python. Pretty much every security product has a Python API. If you don't have a Python API, I'm more or less not even considering you to deploy my environment these days. I need to automate the things that my tools are doing. I don't want to spend a bunch of time clicking through menus. And frankly, the only way to get that to happen is standardizing on a platform and using that to automate a whole bunch of stuff. We've got a lot of depth and talent on my team in Python. 2 or 3 of the people on my team are at least capable of reading Python scripts and editing them. A couple of us actually write and maintain all of them. These frameworks also do a couple other things for you that you're really going to want. They implement row-based access control. So, as you might imagine, you might want some people in these chat channels typing commands, but you don't want everyone who has access to your chat server to execute commands as your bot. Some of the commands that you have might be a bit more privileged than others, or some of them might use key resources that you don't want to just utilize infinitely. For example, anyone actually ever used or been lucky enough to use a VirusTotal paid API key? Yeah, I haven't had it, but it turns out they're really, really expensive, and you're limited based on the number of queries and responses that you get. So if you want to create an interaction where you automatically look up a file hash, and you don't want to make your VirusTotal API go cry, you're going to want to limit access to that command or rate limit the command usage. And lastly, the thing that I didn't start using in this framework until much, much later in the process is Jinja 2 templating. Basically, when you respond to messages, you are going to want to format it in a human readable format. As you'll see later, I was originally creating some pretty gnarly chat boxes here where if someone typed an IP address into the chat channel, it would automatically go and look the AS information up for that IP address. But it would take up this massive amount of space in the message. So you fire an alert into the chat channel, it has 5 IP addresses in it, and then all of a sudden your chat buffer is completely full, one whole page of a single alert looking at the IP address. All of a sudden, the desired effect of making everyone aware of the information results in a massive overload of information they don't need. I don't need half of my machine screen telling me about the AS information this person is. It's interesting information contextually, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to display all the time. So Stab 2 was Carolyn, and Carolyn was a moderate success. She actually lived in production for a year and a half, and only recently we switched to the last form of our bot, or what I hope to be the last form of our bot. This chatbot did very basic automated responses, as you can see above. Basically, regular expressions matching against IP addresses, some file hashes, automatically looking things up. But I mean, that's kind of lame, right? If your purpose in life is to automatically look up numbers and match against regular expressions, I don't need a chatbot to do that. There are tons of tools that can do that. I know that CrowdStrike has tools for that. You can upload the document to OTX and they'll automatically peel out IP addresses and go find information about it. And Positive, FireEye, a number of other threat intel vendors have these tools. And there are even some open source tools that do similar actions. Maltego, or anybody know the name of Maltego's forensics framework? I can't remember. Yeah, okay. It's case file, I think is what it's called. I don't remember. So I started doing some more interesting but less human usable actions. I made a plugin for Airbot called AutoIR. And what AutoIR did is it took a configuration file in JSON and said, for an alert that matches this name, perform these tasks with the fields that we know will be pre-populated with that alert. So this is getting into 2 years ago doing what you're seeing in some of the more modern information security automation platforms like Phantom and Demisto, where they take an alert and they use fields within that alert to automate actions based on what that alert is. I mean, not to say we were doing it before we were cool and be information security hipsters, but we really were doing it before it was cool. And in this case, we were saying, hey, for what we think is a phishing email, take and look up the file hash that we saw attached to that email and see if we saw that file somewhere on our network being transmitted elsewhere. Basically, hey, if we've ever seen this file before, I want to know the name of the file and the context around the file. I've redacted some of the information so you can't see the other fields, but in that it actually tells you who the file was sent from, who it was received by, and a whole bunch of other information about the file that unfortunately exposes a little bit too much information about coming out of our code. But anybody have any complaints about this? Because I know I have complaints about it. It's borderline unusable, right? I mean, without a lot of explanation, you have no idea what's going on. And that's what we ran into. So even though I had this new automation platform that's kind of bleeding edge, it did not take off in our SOC, period. They didn't have any interest in defining the workflows because they had to go through the engineering team to be loaded manually as a JSON document into a backend configuration file. And even the ones that we did have collaboration on when SOC said, hey, this is what we want automated, they had to train new people every single time a new person came in. Oh, here's why that information pops up for some of these alerts, but not for other alerts. So in a lot of cases, it became more confusing than it was beneficial. And the last big complaint was that this plugin actually executed in such a way that it was a massive security vulnerability. Basically, what it did was it took the arguments passed in that JSON file and it found the corresponding script and then used popen to open a process and execute that script. I didn't like that very much because I'm taking borderline unsanitized data and just passing it directly into a command line, and away I go, open a process, and here we go. So a lot of the things that the SOC did want to automate, I flat out said, no, I can't take and pass an email subject line directly into a command line argument because bad things will happen. So 2 months ago or so, I sat down and got some more time to work on this. This has basically been my, whenever I get a little bit of time and don't have a lot to do for a week, I'll sit down and make an update to this bot. Because while it does save us a lot of time, it doesn't, you don't get a lot of time to work on these types of projects, obviously. And I said, when we use this, what do we want the experience to be like? And in my mind, the most awesome bot that I've ever seen, fictional and non-fictional, is Jarvis from Iron Man. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Jarvis is a fictional AI that's capable of having human conversations, and he seemingly has an infinite amount of knowledge about very specific subjects. So he says, hey, tell me what the number of people in this region are, and he can immediately belt out the response of the actual population of the region. Really, what I was excited about, though, was improving user friendliness and the interactions with the bot to make them non-obtuse. We don't have the ability to train people in a custom tool every single time they come in to the organization, so we need to make this such that anyone can kind of learn as they go or learn by watching other people. And then we also need to give it more powerful commands so that when people start using this, they're incentivized to use it because they can do really, really powerful stuff right off the bat. So one of the things that we are capable of doing is we use one of the tools that we have to isolate endpoints in our environment that we think are compromised. And right now, the way that we do that, or the way we were doing it, was you have to send that request through someone who was an engineer. Not because we're hoarding privileges on the engineering side, but because a lot of these products don't have the concept of rich permission sets. So if you give someone the ability to isolate a host, you might actually give them the ability to execute processes on that. And while I might trust you as an incident responder, or as an entry-level SOC analyst to impact one machine on my environment, I certainly don't want you either isolating the domain controller without someone else taking a look at that, or dropping a process on a machine, or grabbing a file off the HR machine. Your HR employees are working on some documents for, hey, what do all the people in information security make? I don't want the SOC analyst having the ability to drop onto the workstation and just grab that file off the workstation and export it to my chat channel. So we're kind of using the bot to extend our existing platforms that we've purchased and hoarded these permissions and said, certain people can't use them, to divvy out very granular permission sets. Hey, you're allowed to isolate machines that match this profile, but you're not allowed to isolate machines that don't match this profile. Where the vendors flat out would take years to implement this sort of feature. It stinks because we're having to implement features for the vendors that we buy products from, but it's really nice because now I can give them the ability to do that, and 5 times a week that they might ask us to isolate a host, now I don't have to do that. It's only in the really severe scenario where they're coming to me and saying, hey, can you isolate this critical server? And frankly, that never happens. If you find yourself asking me to isolate the Exchange servers, then I'd really rather just do that. But when you add these sorts of capabilities, the immediate thing that comes to mind is, oh my gosh, am I really going to trust Slack with the ability to isolate machines in my environment or pull files off of machines in my environment? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. That's really up to you. It does seem a bit reckless, and it can be reckless. You have to be aware of what you're doing. Everyone in the channel that has permissions is in the circle of trust, and that includes whoever's running your chat server. So if you have an internal Linux team that you don't trust all that much, and that's who's running your chat server, then you can't really do this in that. If you have a cloud provider that you don't trust all that much, and you don't want them having access to the machine that does your incident response task delivery, you can't really do this in that either. I can't provide any advice in that regard other than make the risk calculation that makes sense to you and implement controls that make sense. For us, in a lot of cases, that means implementing controls around individual commands. So in this example, you can see that I've locked down the lookup command. You can't type the lookup command unless you're in a specific group of people. That's not for any reason other than administration in this case, but we actually operate with a default deny policy. What that means is if you are added by someone to our chat server, and even if you get into one of the chat channels where the bot exists, the bot won't actually answer any of your commands unless you're permitted explicitly to execute specific commands. We don't have any commands at all, even auto-matching commands where they match on a regular expression a subset of the message that will perform an action. Just flat out. The other thing that we've done that extended beyond this is we started saying, okay, well, let's start trying to push people to use two-factor authentication to log into the chat channel, because that just makes sense. In fact, let's not only log into the chat channel with two-factor, let's require certain commands via a plugin that filters all the commands that go through the chat box to require second-factor auth. So at some point, while you're working during the day, you're going to need to use a command that requires second-factor auth. And when you need to do that, the bot is going to say, hey, that command actually requires an upgraded level of privileges. Please send me an OTP token from your OTP that is specific to elevated commands. Well, this isn't the token that you use to log in. It's a second token that we delegate out to you when you get access to execute privileged commands. And every single time you need to use a privileged command, the bot will ask you for an OTP. This means that unless I have both the OTP to log into your account and the OTP to execute commands as you, I can't execute privilege commands as you execute. This gives you a little bit of protection from whoever might be providing your chat server to you, since I know a lot of us don't get to choose. A lot of us work in corporate environments and we're told, you must use your corporate internal Linux team. That can be frustrating because you might not trust those people with the sorts of things that you do, or you might not want them to implicitly have that. You might not want the administrators of Slack's chat servers to have that implicit level of trust. So this is sort of how you can push into doing this type of thing without causing problems for yourself. Next, we started adding integrations that were a lot more rich than just looking up an IP address. RBot, over the last few months, has gained a lot of additional commands. The two commands above are pulling virus server reports and showdown reports directly into the chat channel. And the idea here is that while you're working in an incident or an event or whatever you might call it, because everyone seems to have their own word for it, if you're working on an issue that you're interested in, and you're interested in an IP address, you can take time to open up a web browser, navigate to Showdown's webpage, and look up an IP address and say, oh look, yes, that server that we saw a file export to does have an FTP server on it, and it is passwordless, so we can go see what files still exist on that FTP server. Or, oh hey, that server that we see scanning us is vulnerable to this vulnerability. And oh hey, all of the things that we've seen scanning us from that provider are vulnerable to that vulnerability. Let's query Showdown and find out what all servers on the internet are vulnerable to that vulnerability. And then let's create a block list of the IP addresses of those servers, because it turns out, for a long period of time, this may not necessarily be true now, there was a group of individuals that was exploiting any publicly accessible Elasticsearch instance that they could get, and using them to scan the internet for web vulnerabilities. So why not just block any publicly accessible Elasticsearch instance? And how many of us actually really want to communicate with a publicly accessible Elasticsearch instance? Not this guy. So far, this stuff is pretty harmless. There's not really a lot of ways you can hurt yourself other than if you have paid API keys, obviously you can overextend those resources really quickly and people find it an easy way to use that data. There are ways to gain that. I'm working on a feature now where you can do a per user API key. So basically when you set up the bot for the first time as a user, when you start typing commands, it'll warn you and say, hey, you're currently making use of the global API key, or as an administrator, you can turn off the global API key. And say, hey, every user has to provide their own API key as a way to come along for the ride. So your users go out, they sign up for their own virus server account, and they get 4 queries per minute. 4 queries per minute doesn't sound like a lot when we're talking about automating, but 4 queries per minute is probably enough when we're talking about individual analysts doing investigation. And then as far as Showdown goes, I don't know what they're charging now. My API key seems to be more or less unlimited as far as I can tell, as long as I don't overextend the 1 request per minute that I have. When I bought my API key 7 years ago, so I don't actually know what their pricing model is. And as far as these interactions go, what I'm seeing is that it makes us it will make us more capable of not making mistakes. When working on larger issues where we might have 1 or 5 or 10 machines that are compromised. So say someone has a piece of cryptoware and it moves from one machine to all the neighboring machines. We haven't had that, to my knowledge, in a long time, but if we did have something like that, the way we would typically work on that sort of thing is we'd all pile in a room. We'd have a whiteboard where we mark down, hey, this is an interesting IP, and this is an interesting IP. Well, anytime that you're writing down IP addresses on a whiteboard, in some cases you run into funny situations. hey, he said 131.257 or 25.7. And all of a sudden, 3 people are working with 3 different IP addresses. Only one of them is the valid IP address for the case. In this case, we know exactly which one it is because it's written down. And we only have to look up the information once because it's already there. You can scroll back and take a look. For me, it's useful just being able to directly instant message the bot and look up pieces of information, or send it a list of IP addresses and have it resolve those IP addresses to host names, or hey, let's take a look at what AS records are attached to all of these machines that we see scanning for. Can we make any? Can we get out or jump to conclusions map and make any sweeping conclusions like, hey, this week all of this provider in China can just go away for a period of time. That's where they're hosting the scanning servers, and I don't want to hear that noise. Whereas previously, you'd have to have some Splunk foo, or you'd have to write a Python script to look at that information. You'd have to be really patient and go to Aaron's website and type in IP address, look up, okay, copy it down. Type it in, copy it down. Oh look, I've looked up 3 in a minute, now I'm getting CAPTCHA. Let's type the CAPTCHA, hit enter. And then, as far as the APIs that I can recommend to get started with this sort of thing, I would definitely look at anything that offers a DNS API because they're more or less providing unfettered access to their data. For example, the team timer data is more or less unlimited in terms of how fast you can access it. Its accuracy is as good as any other AS database. So I've done things like look up thousands of IP addresses in a second, or even set up my Bro instance to look up the AS of every IP address that's not AS. And that'll cause problems for you in different ways. Anytime I can take advantage of a free resource that isn't worried about me knocking over their server, I'm definitely going to do it. So this is Jarvis. Jarvis has... What's time?
11:03.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, this is Jarvis, which you can barely see. So let's try to adjust. I'm sorry, can everyone read, or do I need to make this bigger?
Bigger.
Actually, let me just adjust the resolution just as well. That did absolutely nothing. That's okay, because we're just going to mirror this way. Alright, I hope. There we go. That should be a lot better. Sorry about that. So this is Jarvis. Jarvis actually supports a lot of commands now. Some of these are administrative commands, so as a user you wouldn't normally see these. However, if we get into commands that are interesting, one of the ones that I cannot demonstrate right now is MyMeld. But if anyone here actually uses Palo Alto Firewall, they might be familiar with MyMeld. MyMeld is Palo Alto's intelligence feed tool. Basically, they write a tool that goes out and it pulls from open source intelligence feeds, and you can use it to filter and build whitelists and block lists based on those feeds. This isn't necessarily a plug for the open source tool, but what it is a if you have a shunting script or a script that allows your software to block, and you put it in here, sometimes you might get tickets or issues for, hey, you guys blocked something and we don't know why, and we also don't know when you put it in or how you did it. Well, if the way that you're blocking is you're doing it in a public channel, or you're doing it at least with a tool that logs that command and requires a reason as to why the block is put in, like it does here, then what you'll end up with is a command that allows you to Command that allows you to put in blocks and specify a reason so that when those tickets come into you and you say, hey, you're blocking something like t.co, and your SOC says, well, yes, that's for a valid reason, but you're actually hosting a lot of malware these days. They can have that reason in there, and you can respond back to that issue intelligently and say, hey, it looks like we're going to be blocking for the next 72 hours. There's a malware campaign using an open writable S3 bucket, and we're not going to be taking that block out. Sorry. Resolve your Twitter links manually for a while. I don't know what it's like. This sort of gives you the ability to do things like that. Otherwise, you're going to be depending on their ability to document things on the fly. And from my personal experience, I'm really bad about this. If I don't document why I'm doing something like a block when I'm doing it, it's just not going to get documented. We're going to mysteriously block /27 on the internet, and no one's going to know why until 2 years later when they find out they can't get to the documentation for some open source project that was compromised 2 years ago. So these are the sorts of things that drove me towards this, but the stuff that got me to stay is the idea that you can start saying things like, hey, here's an alert for a sample of data. Hey, we have a problem? All right, so we've resolved the issue of taking up the rest of the chat channel by moving all of the responses into threaded responses. So now, every time an alert comes in, it opens a new thread and it starts responding to that thread saying, hey, here are the automatic actions that are taken on the alert. And when you click on these reports, they immediately take you to, hey, oh, okay, there's nothing virus to about that. Now, this is one of the ways that we're getting around API limitations. You might fire off 25 of these alerts in a minute. And remember, VirusTotal's default limitation for making use of a free API is 4 requests per minute, so obviously you're going to hit your limit really quickly. Instead, VirusTotal actually uses static hyperlinks, so you can just use string formatting to link directly to the IP address. And then if you actually want to look up that file, you can use a command and it'll pull down the full report. Obviously, we can't pull down the full report in this case because they don't have any data for that. But if you go to their API documentation, they actually have a file hash that will always return a response. So say we found a related file, and it will tell us, oh hey, look at that, there are 0 out of 54 positives, and it was last scanned back in 2016. And say we found out that, hey, that IP address that's in there, that's actually interesting. That's actually going to pull back data too. Now in this case, it actually belongs to us, so there's not any information in there. Us as in my employer. But you could say that okay, so obviously Google owns 8.8.8.8, and there are over 1,000 different host names that result from an IP address for some shared user or another. If there were more than one person working on this issue, we'd all be able to see each other's notes. The last goal that I'm hoping to get working sometime in the near future, if we ever get access to do so, is we actually put most of our issues into our issue tracking system and we share with the rest of the IT department. So what I really want to do is I want to take this thread and I want to bundle it up into one large document. And I want to upload it to the corresponding ticket that gets opened for that document, so that we can say, yes, all of our issues are documented the same way because they're not being documented by a person. I want to have a command that closes out this line of communication and then upload that data. Unfortunately, I could not get that working before today. because I had competing priorities, and to know access to our ServiceNow instance. But should I get access to that, this is presently dangerously an open source project that you can happily pull from, but it is very much a work in progress that changes a lot. What I can tell you is that if you're looking at any of the features that you saw today, they're in a certain develop branch not manage master. Those will get merged in maybe this afternoon, at which point you could theoretically be using a better version than we have deployed in production, because over the last couple of days I faced a lot of formatting problems and added a lot of documentation to commands that previously didn't exist. One of my favorite abilities is to be able to say, hey, any command that you type that's kind of close will actually match. And unfortunately, we are seeing stack traces, so look at that. I still haven't fixed everything. Let's see how much time we have remaining. I have exactly 9 minutes left for my allocated time score. I skipped a lot of stuff and went fast, so hopefully the person after me can start on time. But if anyone has any questions, I am certainly willing to spend the rest of the time answering anything you might want to know. And I foolishly do not provide any contact information whatsoever. So what I will do is those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. Yep. If you have any questions, if you want my GitHub profile, it is under the same name, but better typed out. The direct repository located at that. And yes, I realize things are rather hard to put with your eyes. I'm sorry. Questions, comments, feedback? And if you all want to play with a development environment, I don't see why I couldn't just add someone to the Slack instance that I have right now. If you want to play with it, feel free. There are all my personal API keys if you're interested. Cool. Thank you very much for your time.